Hi, I'm Rebecca Applebaum, and today I will share with you Make Way for Ducklings by Robert McCloskey. Mr. and Mrs. Mallard were looking for a place to live, but every time Mr. Mallard saw what looked like a nice place, Mrs. Mallard said it was no good. There were sure to be foxes in the woods, or turtles in the water, and she was not going to raise a family where there might be foxes or turtles. So they flew on and on. When they got to Boston, they felt too tired to fly any further. There was a nice pond in the public garden, with a little island on it. The very place to spend the night, quacked Mr. Mallard. So down they flapped. Let's give them a nice little island to spend the night at. What do you guys think? Think it looks like a nice island? The next morning, they fished for their breakfast in the mud at the bottom of the pond, but they didn't find much. Just as they were getting ready to start on their way, a strange, enormous bird came by. It was pushing a boat full of people, and there was a man sitting on its back. "Good morning," quacked Mr. Mallard, being polite. Big Bird was too proud to answer. But the people on the boat threw peanuts into the water, so the Mallards followed them all round the pond and got another breakfast, better than the first. "I like this place," said Mrs. Mallard as they climbed onto the bank and waddled along. "Why don't we build a nest and raise our ducklings right in this pond? There are no foxes and no turtles, and the people feed us peanuts. What could be better?" "Good," said Mr. Mallard, delighted that at last Mrs. Mallard had found a place that suited her. But... no, what do you guys think is going to happen? Oh no, it's a kid on a bicycle. "Look out!" squawked Mrs. Mallard, all of a dither. "You'll get run over." And when she got her breath, she added, "This is no place for babies, with all those horrid things rushing about. We'll have to look somewhere else." Don't run over ducks. It's not good. So they flew over Beacon Hill and round the State House, but there was no place there. They looked in Louisburg Square, but there was no water to swim in. They flew over the Charles River. "This is better," quacked Mr. Mallard. "That island looks like a nice quiet place, and it's only a little way from the public garden. Shall we give the ducks their new island? Nice new island for them." "Yes," said Mrs. Mallard, remembering the peanuts. "That looks like just the right place to hatch ducklings." So they chose a cozy spot among the bushes near the water and settled down to build their nest, and only just in time, for now they were beginning to molt. All their old wing feathers started to drop out, and they would not be able to fly again until the new ones grew in. But of course they could swim, and one day they swam over to the park on the river bank, and there they met a policeman called Michael. Add Michael there. Nice Michael for them. Michael fed them peanuts, and after that, the Mallards called on Michael every day, because peanuts are awesome, right guys? And now, what happens, do you think? Does Miss Mallard get a nest? After Miss Mallard had laid 8 eggs in the nest, she couldn't go to visit Michael anymore, because she had to sit on the eggs and keep them warm. She moved off the nest only to get a drink of water, or to have her lunch, or to count the eggs and make sure they were all there. One day, the ducklings hatched out. First came Jack, then Cack, then Lack, then Mack, and Knack, and Whack, and Pack, and Quack. Mr. and Mrs. Mallard were bursting with pride. It was a great responsibility, taking care of so many ducklings, and it kept them very busy. Shall we give them ducklings? Ducklings on the little island? One day, Mr. Mallard decided he'd like to take a trip to see what the rest of the river was like further on, so off he set. "I'll meet you in a week in the public garden," he quacked over his shoulder. "Take good care of the ducklings." "Don't you worry," said Mrs. Mallard. "I know all about bringing up children." And she did. She taught them how to swim and dive. Diving's fun. You guys know how to swim and dive? She taught them to walk in a line, to come when they were called, and to keep a safe distance from bikes and scooters and other things with wheels. When at last she felt perfectly satisfied with them, she said one morning, "Come along, children, follow me." Before you could wink an eyelash, Jack, Cack, Lack, Mack, Knack, Whack, Pack, and Quack fell into line, just as they had been taught. Mrs. Mallard led them way into the water, and they swam behind her to the opposite bank. Such good little ducklings, right? There they waded ashore and waddled along till they came to the highway. Miss Mallard stepped out to cross the road. "Honk, honk," went the horns on the speeding cars. "Quack," went Mrs. Mallard as she tumbled back again. "Quack, quack, quack, quack," went Jack, Cack, Lack, Mack, Knack, Whack, Pack, and Quack, just as loud as their little quackers could quack. The cars kept speeding by and honking, and Miss Mallard and the ducklings kept right on quack, quack, quacking. Can you guys quack for me? Quack, 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 quack. Oh. They made such a noise that Michael, you guys remember Michael, came running, waving his arms and blowing his whistle. He planted himself in the center of the road, raised one hand to stop traffic, and then beckoned with the other, the way policemen do, for Miss Mallard to cross over. Nice friend Michael is to them, isn't he? As soon as Miss Mallard and the ducklings were safe on the other side and on their way down Mount Vernon Street, Michael rushed back to his police booth. He called Clancy at headquarters and said, "There's a family of ducks walking down the street." Clancy said, "Family of what?" "Ducks!" yelled Michael. "Send a police car, quick!" Meanwhile, Miss Mallard had reached the corner bookshop and turned into Charles Street with Jack, Cack, Lack, Mack, Knack, Whack, Pack, and Quack all marching in line behind her. Had to get all 8 of those ducklings, eh? Everyone stared. An old lady from Beacon Hill said, "Isn't it amazing?" And the man who swept the street said, "Well now, ain't that nice?" And when Miss Mallard heard them, she was so proud she tipped her nose in the air and walked along with an extra swing in her waddle. When they came to the corner of Beacon Street, there was the police car with 4 policemen that Clancy had sent from headquarters. The policemen held back the traffic so Miss Mallard and the ducklings could march across the street. Right on into the public garden. Inside the gate, they all turned around to say thank you to the policeman. The policeman smiled and waved goodbye. The policeman. When they reached the pond and swam across to the little island, there was Mr. Mallard waiting for them, just as he had promised. Bring Mr. Mallard back, and we have returned to the little island, where all the ducks can be safe and happy now, that they know how to avoid things with wheels. The ducklings liked the little new island so much that they decided to live there. All day long they follow the swan boats and eat peanuts. And when night falls, they swim to their little island and go to sleep. And that is the end of Make Way for Ducklings. An extension that I'd really like to do for this book would be an art project where the kids actually got to design their own islands for the ducks to live in, where they would have they would draw the islands, and then they would glue either colorful sand or rocks or seashells and possibly plants to the page to create the perfect island for the ducks. As for the magnetic board, I drew everything on it on construction paper. I could laminate it if I would like to laminate it at some point to use it on a more regular basis as a story time prop, but in order to do it, I just took construction paper and drew on it. You could, if you were not necessarily artistically inclined, go and find actual pictures of ducks to print up on paper and then laminate those, or find cutout templates for policemen and ducks. You could also scan in a page of the book and actually copy them, because the illustrations are absolutely gorgeous. And that is my presentation on Make Way for Ducklings. Thank you.